Alright. Hold up, stay. You think you know everything about your boys? You think after years of binge watching every V-Live, every SKZ Code episode, every single behind-the-scenes clip, you've cracked the code on what stray kids actually love to eat? Yeah, sure, we all know Lino's obsessed with chicken, Felix can't live without his fairy bread, and Han practically breathes cheesecake. But what about the foods they secretly crave when the cameras aren't rolling? The comfort dishes they whisper about in late-night studio sessions? The childhood flavors that hit them right in the soul but never made it to a single fan content? Here's the thing, there's a whole hidden menu behind those 8 guys that even the most dedicated stay has never uncovered. What if one member has a guilty pleasure so unexpected it would literally break fan forums? What if another member's ultimate comfort food traces back to a deeply emotional childhood memory that he's barely ever talked about? And what if the member you least expect turns out to have the most sophisticated palate in the entire group? 8 members. 8 secrets. 1 list. From number 8 all the way down to number 1. Each reveal is gonna hit different. So buckle up, grab your snacks, and get ready, because this list, it's not just about food. It's about the stories, the memories, and the hidden layers of stray kids that you never knew existed. Let's get into it. Number 8. EN. The Magnae's old soul comfort, Busan's forgotten bowl. You know what's wild? When you think of Hyunjin, the eternal Magnae, the sunshine incarnate, the guy whose smile alone could power an entire concert venue, you probably picture him munching on something sweet, right? Maybe a slice of cake, some trendy dessert from a soul cafe, or one of those colorful Instagram-worthy pastries that idols always seem to be holding in their selfies. That's the image. That's the vibe. But here's where the plot twist hits, and trust me, this one's a slow burn that cuts deep. N's actual hidden comfort food. The dish he genuinely craves when the world gets loud and his body is running on fumes after back-to-back schedules. Isn't anything flashy, isn't anything cute, and definitely isn't anything you'd expect from the youngest member of one of the biggest fourth-generation K-pop groups on the planet. It's dwaejjigeukbap. Yeah, you read that right. Pork bones soup with rice. The kind of dish your Korean grandfather orders at 6 in the morning at a tiny, steam-filled restaurant tucked in an alley somewhere in the Seungmin district of Busan. The kind of food that doesn't photograph well, doesn't trend on Twitter, and absolutely nobody under the age of 40 is supposed to be obsessed with. But Hyunjin? He's different. He's always been different, and this is one of those details that proves it in the most quietly beautiful way possible. Let's rewind for a second and talk about what dwaejjigeukbap actually is, because if you're not Korean or you've never been to Busan, there's a very real chance you've never even heard of it, and that's kind of the whole point of why this is on the list. Dwaejjigeukbap is, at its core, a Busan thing. It's not a Seoul dish. It's not something you'll find hyped up on food blogs targeting tourists. It's a regional specialty that was born out of necessity during the Korean War era, when Busan served as the temporary capital of South Korea and refugees flooded the city by the hundreds of thousands. Resources were scarce, meat was a luxury, but pork bones, the parts that most people threw away, were cheap and available. So the people of Busan did what people always do when survival demands creativity. They made something extraordinary out of almost nothing. They boiled those bones for hours, sometimes overnight, extracting every ounce of flavor, every bit of collagen, every whisper of richness from what the rest of the world considered scraps. The broth that emerged was milky white, deeply savory, impossibly comforting, a bowl of resilience disguised as a simple soup. Rice was added directly into the bowl, soaking up all that slow-cooked depth, and the tender pork meat that fell off the bones was laid on top with a side of salted shrimp paste, raw garlic, sliced green onions, and chili flakes that you mixed in according to your own preference. No 2 bowls ever taste exactly the same because every person seasons theirs differently, and that's part of the magic. It's personal. It's intimate. It's yours. Now, here's where it connects to Hyunjin. Hyunjin was born on February 8, 2001, in Busan, South Korea, the very city where dwaejjigeukbap isn't just food, it's identity. It's heritage. It's the taste of home in the most fundamental, almost spiritual sense. Before JYP Entertainment, before Stray Kids, before the world knew his name, Hyunjin was just a kid growing up in one of South Korea's most vibrant port cities, a place where the ocean air mixes with the steam rising from countless gukbap restaurants that have been operating for decades, some of them for over 50 years with recipes passed down through 3 generations. And in those early years, long before survival shows and debut stages and world tours, there were mornings. Quiet, unremarkable mornings where a young Hyunjin would sit with his family, probably at one of those no-frills neighborhood joints with plastic tables and fluorescent lighting and a TV mounted on the wall playing the morning news, and he'd eat a bowl of dwaeji gukbap. Not because it was special, not because it was exciting, but because it was there, and it was warm, and it was what Busan kids just did. That's the thing about comfort food, right? It doesn't become comfort food because you choose it. It becomes comfort food because it chooses you. It imprints on you during the moments you weren't paying attention, the ordinary Tuesdays, the lazy Sunday mornings, the unremarkable afternoons that your brain somehow decides to store in the deepest, most protected vault of your memory. And then one day, you're 20-something years old, living in Seoul, exhausted from dance practice, your muscles aching, your voice strained, your mind racing with choreography counts and lyric revisions, and suddenly, out of nowhere, you don't want ramen, you don't want fried chicken, you don't want any of the convenient, easy options that surround you in the capital city. You want that bowl. That specific bowl. The one that tastes like the kitchen of your childhood, like the sound of your parents' voices in the morning, like the version of yourself that existed before the world started watching. That's what dwaeji gukbap is for Ian. It's not just food. It's a time machine. And here's a detail that makes this even more interesting from a cultural perspective. Dwaeji gukbap is considered a sober-up food in Korea. It's what adults eat after a long night of drinking, what taxi drivers eat before their dawn shifts, what construction workers eat to fuel a day of hard labor. It's fundamentally a working-class dish, a blue-collar bowl, an anti-glamour meal in every possible way. And yet, here's this idol, this polished, camera-ready, stage-commanding performer who stands in front of tens of thousands of screaming fans, and his soul food is the most humble, most unglamorous dish in all of Busan's culinary canon. There's something incredibly grounding about that, isn't there? In an industry that's obsessed with image, with aesthetics, with the curated perfection of every single public-facing moment, Hyunjin's heart still belongs to a cloudy bowl of pork bone soup with a side of raw garlic cloves and fermented shrimp paste.
No filter, no styling, no presentation.
Just depth, warmth, and honesty. Members have occasionally caught glimpses of this preference, too. There have been those small, blink-and-you-miss-it moments during group meals or vlogs where N has quietly mentioned missing Busan food, or where he'd gravitate toward the most traditional, least trendy option on a menu while the older members were going for the flashy stuff. It's subtle, and that's exactly why most stays have never picked up on it. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't become a meme. It just sits there, quietly, like the dish itself, unpretentious, unassuming, but deeply meaningful if you know where to look. And if you really think about it, dwaeji gukbap actually mirrors Hyunjin's own journey in a way that's almost poetic. He was the youngest trainee to join the Stray Kids survival show. He was underestimated, overlooked. Some viewers at the time questioned whether he was ready, whether he had enough experience, enough edge, enough raw material to stand alongside members like Changbin and Han who came in breathing fire with their rap skills, or Hyunjin who walked in looking like he'd been sculpted by Renaissance artists. Hyunjin was quieter, simpler, less immediately explosive. But just like that humble bowl of pork soup that was born from scarcity and turned into a cultural treasure, Hyunjin took what he had, a pure tone, an unshakable work ethic, and a warmth that could melt glaciers, and he slow-cooked his way into becoming one of the most beloved members of one of the most successful groups in the world. He didn't need flash. He needed time. And time, just like a proper pot of gukbap broth, reveals everything. So the next time you see N smiling on stage, hitting those high notes with that crystalline voice of his, looking like the embodiment of youthful joy, just remember, behind that smile is a kid from Busan whose heart still aches for a steaming, unglamorous bowl of pork bone soup at a plastic table under bad lighting. And honestly, That might be the most real, most human, most lovable thing about him. But hold on, you think that was unexpected? Wait until you hear number 7. Because the next member's hidden food obsession doesn't just surprise people, it genuinely confuses everyone who finds out. Ready? Say next. Number 7. Seungmin. The clean-cut puppy's dirty little street secret, blood and all. Okay, let's talk about Kim Seungmin for a second. The vocal perfectionist. The human pitch corrector. The guy who irons his pajamas, figuratively speaking, because everything in his life has to be neat, organized, and exactly where it belongs. This is the member who color codes his notes, who corrects the other members' grammar on live broadcasts without a single ounce of shame, who radiates this almost clinical level of precision in everything he does, from his vocal runs to the way he folds his laundry. He's the Busan Bears fanatic who watches baseball with the analytical intensity of a seasoned sports commentator. He's the guy stays lovingly call puppy because of his bright, clean, wholesome energy that feels like sunshine filtered through freshly washed windows. So, naturally, when you imagine Seungmin eating, you probably picture him at a nice, well-lit restaurant, napkin on his lap, utensils perfectly aligned, ordering something sensible, maybe a clean pasta, maybe a well-assembled salad, maybe some grilled fish with a side of steamed vegetables. Something orderly. Something that matches the brand.
Right? Wrong.
So catastrophically, beautifully, hilariously wrong. Because Kim Seungmin's hidden food obsession, the one he doesn't broadcast, the one that doesn't fit the narrative, the one that would make every single stay do a double take, is sundae. And no, not the ice cream sundae with whipped cream and a cherry on top. We're talking Korean sundae.
순대.
Blood sausage. The gnarly, glistening, dark-skinned tubes of pig intestine stuffed with glass noodles, barley, pork blood, and a medley of seasonings, served steaming hot from a giant metal pot on the side of a busy Korean street by an ajumma who's been making the same recipe for 30 years and doesn't care even a little bit about your aesthetic sensibilities. This is not cute food. This is not clean food. This is not the kind of food you see on a carefully curated idol's Instagram story. This is the kind of food that stains your fingers, that has a texture most foreigners describe as challenging on their best day, that sits in a pile on a steel tray next to a mound of salt mixed with ground perilla seeds, and a bowl of tteokbokki sauce, so red it looks like it could double as war paint. And Seungmin? He loves it. Not casually. Not as a once-in-a-while thing. We're talking about a deep, almost spiritual connection to this dish that traces all the way back to his childhood in Seoul and the street food culture that's woven into the DNA of every Korean kid who grew up walking past those carts after school. Let's get into what sundae actually is, because the history alone is enough to fill a documentary. Korean sundae isn't some modern invention. It's not a trend. It's not a TikTok food. This dish has roots that stretch back to the Goryeo dynasty. We're talking the 900s AD, nearly 11 centuries ago. The concept of stuffing intestines with grains and blood existed in Korean cuisine long before most of the foods we consider traditional today were even conceptualized. Historians believe the technique may have been influenced by Mongol culinary traditions during the Goryeo-Mongol interactions in the 13th century, as similar blood sausage preparations exist across Central Asian cuisines. But Korea took the concept and made it entirely its own, evolving sundae into dozens of regional varieties that differ in filling, casing, seasoning, and serving style depending on where you are in the country. In Seoul, the classic street sundae, called gun sundae or just plain sundae, uses pig intestine casings filled primarily with dangmyeon, sweet potato glass noodles, glutinous rice, pork blood, and a blend of garlic, ginger, sesame oil, and black pepper. The mixture is tied off, boiled until everything sets into a firm but yielding texture, and then sliced into thick rounds that reveal a gorgeous mosaic cross-section of translucent noodles suspended in a deep, burgundy-purple matrix of coagulated blood. It sounds intense because it is intense. And that visual, that unapologetically raw, visceral, almost medieval appearance, is precisely why so many people outside of Korea, and even some younger Koreans, have a complicated relationship with it. But for those who grew up with it, for those who have that taste memory locked into their cellular structure, there is absolutely nothing on earth that hits the same way. And Seungmin is firmly, unapologetically in that camp. Now here's where the narrative gets really interesting from a personality standpoint. Seungmin is, by all observable metrics, the most put-together member of Stray Kids. He's the one who keeps things running smoothly behind the scenes, the one who remembers schedules, the one who holds the vocal line together with his insanely stable pitch and technique. He's meticulous, disciplined, almost surgical in his approach to his craft. And yet, his comfort food, his soul food, the thing his heart reaches for when all the structure and precision become exhausting, is the messiest, most chaotic, most gloriously unrefined street food in the entire Korean culinary landscape. Don't you see the poetry in that? It's like discovering that a world-class architect's favorite place to relax is a cluttered, chaotic flea market. It's the contrast that makes it beautiful. It tells you that underneath all that composure, all that control, all that carefully maintained order, there's a part of Seungmin that craves the opposite. That needs the opposite. That finds genuine peace in the sensory chaos of a street-side Sunday cart. The steam, the noise, the clatter of metal tongs against steel trays, the aunties shouting orders, the drunk salaryman arguing about soccer at the next table, the beautiful, unfiltered disorder of real life happening in real time without a script or a camera angle or a stylist telling you where to stand. There's a version of Seungmin that exists at those carts that the world doesn't get to see. The one without the in-ear monitors, without the choreography counts in his head, without the weight of being an idol in one of the most demanding entertainment industries on the planet. Just a guy from Seoul, standing on a sidewalk, eating blood sausage with his fingers, dipping each piece into that salt and perilla mixture, and feeling, for a few minutes, like he's 12 years old again, walking home from school with his backpack too heavy and his future still wide open. And let's talk about the actual eating experience for a moment, because this is where Sunday separates the casual fans from the real ones. The proper way to eat street Sunday in Korea, the way Seungmin would eat it, isn't delicate. You don't use fancy chopsticks. You grab a toothpick or you just use your hands. The sundae comes out hot, almost too hot to handle, sliced thick and piled onto a tray with a generous side of liver and lung. Yes, organ meats, because in the sundae world, the awful sides aren't optional, they're essential. The liver is dense and mineral-rich, with a flavor that's almost metallic in its intensity, and the lung is light and spongy, with a texture that confuses your mouth because it's unlike anything else you've ever chewed. You dip everything into the salt mix, and sometimes, if you're at a cart that offers it, into a thick, sweet, spicy tteokbokki sauce that coats each piece in a glossy red shellac of gochujang-based goodness. The combination, the savory, iron-rich depth of the blood sausage, the nutty earthiness of the perilla salt, the chewy resistance of the glass noodle filling, the occasional burst of garlic that blooms across your palate, is one of the most complex and satisfying flavor experiences in Korean street food. It's not pretty. It's not photogenic. But it is, without question, extraordinary. And Seungmin knows this. He's known it since before he knew what a key change was, since before he could sing a perfect high note, since before the name Stray Kids meant anything to anyone. He knew it in the way that only a kid who grew up in the streets of Seoul can know it, not through food blogs or YouTube reviews, but through lived experience, through cold winter evenings when the warmth of a Sunday cart was the best thing in the world, through the specific memory of that first bite on a day you can't quite remember, but your taste buds absolutely can. There's also a fascinating social dimension to Sunday that connects to Seungmin's role within the group. In Korean culture, Sunday is a communal food. You don't order Sunday for yourself. You order a tray and you share it. It's inherently social, inherently about connection, about gathering around a small table and eating from the same plate with the people you care about. And isn't that exactly what Seungmin does within Stray Kids? He's the connector. The one who bridges the chaotic energy of members like Han and Changbin with the quieter wavelengths of someone like Ian. He's the communal glue, the shared plate that everyone reaches toward. His food mirrors his function, and that's not a coincidence. That's character, expressed through cuisine. Now, if you think Seungmin's pick was a curveball, number 6 is about to enter a completely different arena. We're talking about a member whose hidden food love isn't just unexpected. It's practically a whole lifestyle that nobody in the fandom has ever connected to him. Who is it? What is it? Say next to find out. Number 6. Changbin. The dark rapper's softest secret, a bowl of silence. Let's set the scene. Co Changbin. Spear B. The human wrecking ball of Stray Kids' rap line. The guy who steps into a recording booth and proceeds to verbally dismantle every beat that 3racha puts in front of him with the kind of ferocity that makes you genuinely wonder if the microphone needs therapy afterward. This is the member who wrote bars so aggressive on God's Menu that the track felt less like a song and more like a culinary declaration of war. The one whose verse on Thunderous hit with the force of an actual atmospheric event. The compact, muscular, all-power, no-filler rapper whose stage presence is so intense that he could probably intimidate a heavyweight boxer just by making eye contact. Changbin's entire public identity is built on power, on impact, on density. He is, in every conceivable way, the sonic equivalent of a clenched fist, compact, loaded, and devastating upon contact. So when you imagine what this man eats behind closed doors, your brain automatically goes to the heavy stuff, right?
Galbi.
Samgyeopsal. A massive pile of grilled beef ribs dripping with marinade. Maybe a giant bowl of jjajangmyeon with extra pork. Something aggressive. Something with weight. Something that matches the energy of a guy who raps like he's trying to punch a hole through the space-time continuum. And yeah, Changbin does love his meat. That's well documented. That's on the record. That's been captured in approximately 900 different eating broadcasts. But that's not his secret. That's his public menu. The secret, the one that would genuinely short-circuit every stay's brain if they fully understood the depth of it, is kongguksu.
콩국수.
Cold soy milk noodle soup. The single quietest, gentlest, most whisper-soft dish in the entire Korean culinary universe. And right now, I need you to sit with that contrast for a moment. Really let it sink in. The hardest rapper in 4th-gen K-pop, the guy whose vocal cords are essentially registered weapons, whose lyrics hit like freight trains, whose energy on stage could power a small city. This man's hidden comfort food is a bowl of cold, unseasoned, ivory white soybean broth with thin wheat noodles floating in it like they're meditating.
No spice.
No fire. No explosion of flavor. Just calm. Pure. Unadulterated. Almost monastic calm in liquid form. If that doesn't break your brain, nothing will. But here's the thing, once you understand what kongguksu actually is, and once you understand who Changbin actually is beneath the spear B armor, this stops being a contradiction and starts being the most logical thing in the world.
So, let's get into it.
Kongguksu is a traditional Korean summer dish that's been around for centuries, with origins tracing back to the Joseon Dynasty era when soybeans were one of the primary protein sources for the Korean population. The dish is elegantly simple in concept but deceptively complex in execution. You start with dried soybeans, not the processed kind, not soy milk from a carton, but actual dried beans that need to be soaked overnight, sometimes for 12 to 16 hours, until they've absorbed enough water to nearly double in size. Then you boil them until they're completely tender, drain them, and here's where it gets labor-intensive, you grind them. Traditionally, this was done with a stone mill called a metol, which Korean grandmothers would turn by hand in slow, rhythmic circles, grinding the soaked beans into a thick, creamy paste that was then mixed with cold water and strained through cloth to produce a fresh, raw soy milk that tastes absolutely nothing like the box stuff you buy at a grocery store. Fresh ground soy milk for kongguksu is rich, nutty, slightly sweet, and has this incredible silky texture that coats your mouth in a way that's almost luxurious. It's the kind of flavor that doesn't shout. It doesn't demand your attention. It just arrives, quietly, and fills every corner of your palate with this gentle, enveloping warmth, except it's served ice cold, which creates this paradox of emotional warmth delivered through physical coolness that is genuinely one of the most unique sensory experiences in all of Asian cuisine. The noodles used in kongguksu are thin wheat noodles, sometimes Seungmin, cooked until just al dente, then rinsed under cold water until they're completely chilled and slightly firm. They're placed in a bowl, usually a simple, unadorned ceramic bowl because kongguksu doesn't do theatrics, and then the cold soy milk broth is poured over them generously until the noodles are submerged in that pale, creamy liquid. The traditional garnish is minimal, maybe a few slices of cucumber, a sprinkle of sesame seeds, and sometimes half a boiled egg. Some people add a pinch of salt. Some purists add nothing at all. And that's it. That's the whole dish.
No gochujang. No garlic. No soy sauce.
No kimchi on the side. Just the clean, pure, unadorned taste of soybeans meeting wheat in a bowl of cold simplicity. It's the culinary equivalent of a deep breath. Now, why does Changbin of all people gravitate toward this? Here's where the story gets personal, and here's where you start to see the real human behind the stage name. Changbin grew up in Yongin, Gyeonggi Province, a suburban city south of Seoul that's close enough to the capital to feel its influence, but far enough away to retain its own quieter, more residential character. And Changbin's family, like many Korean families in that region, maintained deep connections to traditional Korean foodways. His grandmother, his mother, they cooked. Real cooking. Not the quick, convenient, microwave-friendly kind of cooking that dominates modern Korean urban life, but the slow, intentional, generational kind of cooking where recipes aren't written down because they live in the hands of the women who've been making them for decades. And kongguksu in Korean households is the ultimate expression of that kind of cooking. You cannot fake kongguksu. You cannot shortcut it. The soybeans have to soak. The grinding has to happen. The straining has to be done by hand. Every single step requires patience, and patience is the one ingredient that no amount of money or technology can substitute. When Changbin eats kongguksu, he's not eating a dish, he's eating time. He's eating the hours his grandmother spent soaking beans the night before. He's eating the slow, circular motion of her hands grinding them into paste. He's eating the love that expresses itself not through words but through labor, through the quiet, unglamorous act of preparing something from scratch, because the person you're feeding deserves the real thing, not the shortcut. And for a guy like Changbin, who spends his professional life operating at maximum intensity, who pours every ounce of his creative energy into lyrics and performances that are designed to overwhelm, to dominate, to leave no room for silence, kongguksu is the antidote. It's the reset button. It's the thing that brings his internal volume from 11 back down to 0. Think about what Changbin's daily life actually looks like during comeback seasons. He's in the studio until 3, 4, 5 in the morning, layering vocals, rewriting verses, arguing with Jisung and Chan about flow patterns and rhythmic structures. He's in dance practice for hours, pushing his body to match choreography that was designed for people 6 inches taller than him, and doing it with such explosive power that you forget he's the shortest member on stage. His brain is constantly firing, creating, analyzing, perfecting, scrapping, starting over. The noise inside his head must be absolutely relentless. And then he comes home. And all he wants, all his body and soul are asking for, is quiet. Not silence in the literal sense, but quiet in the emotional sense. The calm that comes from a food that doesn't try to impress you, doesn't assault your senses, doesn't demand anything from you except that you sit down, pick up your chopsticks, and let the cold, gentle, nurturing simplicity of soybean broth do its work. Kongguksu is Changbin's way of coming home to himself. It's the dish that says, you don't have to be Spearby right now. You don't have to be powerful. You don't have to prove anything. You can just be Seo Changbin, the kid from Yongin who likes quiet food on hot days. And there's a seasonal dimension to this that makes it even more poignant. Kongguksu is strictly a summer dish in Korea. It appears on restaurant menus in June and disappears by September. It's ephemeral, temporary. You can't have it whenever you want, you have to wait for it, and then you have to let it go. There's a melancholy to that, isn't there? A bittersweetness that mirrors the idle life in ways that are almost too on the nose. The best things are temporary. The quiet moments between comebacks, the rare free afternoons, the stolen hours of rest in a schedule that never truly stops, they come and they go, just like kongguksu season. And maybe that's why Changbin treasures it so much. Because it's not always available. Because it requires him to be present, to notice the season, to slow down long enough to realize that summer has arrived, and with it, the possibility of that bowl. It forces mindfulness on a man whose default setting is maximum overdrive. Still with me?
Good.
Because number 5 is where this list takes a hard left turn into territory that is genuinely going to change the way you see one particular member forever. We're not just talking about a food preference here. We're talking about a hidden ritual, an almost sacred routine that this member has kept entirely off camera. Who? Say next. Number 5. Hyunjin. The artist's burnt offering, golden imperfection. Close your eyes for a second and think about Hwang Hyunjin. Not Hyunjin the idol. Not Hyunjin the center. Not Hyunjin the dancer, whose body moves like it was designed by some celestial choreographer who got bored making normal humans. Think about Hyunjin the painter. The one who goes by Sam when he's standing in front of a canvas. The one who smears acrylics with his bare hands because brushes feel too distant, too mediated, too much like a barrier between his soul and the surface he's trying to mark. The one who cries when he paints sometimes, not because he's sad, but because the act of creating something from nothing cracks open a door inside him that he can't fully control and doesn't entirely want to. That Hyunjin. The one who exists in the hours between midnight and dawn, when the rest of the world is asleep, and the only sound in his studio apartment is the scratch of a palette knife and the low hum of whatever playlist he's got on loop. That's the Hyunjin who matters for this story, because his hidden food obsession doesn't come from a restaurant, doesn't come from a delivery app, doesn't come from any place that serves things on plates with garnishes and presentation. It comes from a small, heavy, traditional Korean iron pot called a gamasot. And the food? Nurungji.
누룽지.
Scorched rice. Burnt rice crust. The thin, golden brown, crackling layer of rice that forms at the bottom of a pot when you cook rice the old way, not in a modern electric rice cooker with fuzzy logic and a digital display, but in a heavy-bottomed pot over direct heat, the way Korean grandmothers did it for centuries before technology made it unnecessary. The crispy, caramelized, slightly bitter, deeply nutty sheet of rice that most modern Koreans have never even tasted because it literally cannot exist in an electric rice cooker. It's a relic, a ghost of a culinary tradition that's slowly disappearing from everyday Korean life. And Hyunjin is quietly, privately, almost secretly keeping it alive in his own kitchen. Now, before we go any further, let me explain why this is on this list, and not just some quirky food fact, because the story behind Nurungji and the reason Hyunjin is drawn to it is one of the most unexpectedly profound things you'll encounter in this entire countdown. Nurungji is, at its most fundamental level, a mistake. Or at least, that's what it started as. When you cook rice in a traditional iron pot over an open flame or a gas stove, the bottom layer of rice inevitably gets more heat than the rest. It dries out. It toasts. It browns. And if you're not careful, it burns. For most of culinary history, this was considered a problem, a flaw in the cooking process, an indication that you'd left the rice on too long or your heat was too high. It was the part of the meal that wasn't supposed to happen. But here's where Korean ingenuity, and honestly, Korean poetry, transforms the narrative entirely. Instead of throwing away the burnt layer, Korean cooks embraced it. They scraped it off the bottom of the pot, and they discovered something remarkable. That thin crust of scorched rice had a flavor profile that the perfectly cooked rice above it could never achieve. It was nutty, toasty, slightly bitter in a way that lingered on the back of your tongue, like a pleasant memory. It had a crunch that was deeply satisfying, not the aggressive crunch of something fried, but a delicate, shattering crunch, like biting into a thin sheet of caramelized sugar except savory. And when you poured hot water into the pot after removing the main rice, that residual crust would soften just slightly and release its flavors into the water, creating nurungji tang, scorched rice tea, a warm, golden, subtly sweet liquid that was traditionally served as the final course of a Korean meal, a digestive that soothed the stomach and signaled that the eating was done and the resting could begin. Do you see why this matters to Hyunjin? Do you see the connection? Nurungji is the art of finding beauty in what was supposed to be a flaw. It's the elevation of imperfection into something sacred. It's the philosophical twin of every paint splatter that wasn't planned but somehow made the canvas better, every dance move that deviated from the choreography but felt more honest than the original, every crack in a piece of pottery that a Japanese kintsugi master would fill with gold because the break made it more beautiful than it ever was when it was whole. Nurungji is wabi-sabi in edible form. And Hyunjin, the artist, the creator, the man who has publicly spoken about his struggles with perfectionism, about the pressure of being the visual of a group where millions of eyes scrutinize every angle of his face and every line of his body, finds peace in a food that exists only because perfection failed. That's not a coincidence. That's resonance on a level that goes beyond taste buds and enters the territory of the soul. Here's the ritual, and this is the part that even the members have only caught glimpses of. Late at night, after painting sessions that leave his hands stained with pigment and his mind buzzing with a kind of creative exhaustion that's equal parts depleting and exhilarating, Hyunjin doesn't reach for his phone to order food. He doesn't microwave leftovers. He doesn't rummage through a convenience store bag. He takes out a small, heavy-bottomed pot, not a gamasot exactly, because those are enormous and meant for family-sized cooking, but a smaller version, a tukbigi or a cast-iron vessel that serves the same purpose at a personal scale. He measures out a single serving of rice. He washes it, soaks it briefly, adds water, and puts it on the stove over medium heat. And then he waits, not scrolling through his phone, not watching something on a screen, just waiting, listening. Because making nurungji properly is an auditory experience as much as a culinary one. First, you hear the water boiling. Then the bubbling slows as the water absorbs into the rice. Then there's a period of near silence where the steam does its work. And then, if you're paying attention, if you're truly present, you hear it. A faint crackling. A soft, irregular ticking sound, like tiny fireworks going off at the molecular level, as the bottom layer of rice begins to toast against the hot metal surface of the pot. That sound is the signal. That sound is what separates nurungji from burnt rice. It means the Maillard reaction is happening, the same chemical process that gives bread its golden crust, that gives seared steak its complex flavor, that gives coffee beans their depth during roasting. Sugars and amino acids in the rice are combining under heat to create hundreds of new flavor compounds that didn't exist moments before. And Hyunjin has learned, through repetition and patience, and probably more than a few pots of fully burnt rice in his early attempts, to identify the exact moment when that crackling reaches its peak, the moment of maximum flavor development just before it tips over into actual burning. He turns off the heat. He lets the pot sit for a few minutes, because the residual heat continues to work, and pulling it too early means a crust that's underdeveloped, not quite committed to its own transformation. Then he flips the pot, taps the bottom, and out comes a disc of golden brown rice crust, thin, fragile, imperfect in shape, with darker patches where the heat was more intense and lighter areas where it was gentle. No two pieces of nurungji ever look the same, just like no two paintings ever look the same, and that's the entire point. He breaks it with his hands, not with utensils. With his hands, the same hands that paint, that dance, that express what his words cannot. The crust shatters into irregular pieces, each one a different size, a different shade of gold, a different thickness. He eats them slowly, one piece at a time, often while sitting on the floor of his studio, surrounded by canvases in various stages of completion, paint tubes scattered like spent ammunition, and the particular kind of silence that only exists in a room where creation has recently happened. Sometimes he pours hot water into the pot to make the nurungji tang, that golden, slightly sweet, slightly smoky tea that tastes like warmth distilled into liquid form. He drinks it without sugar, without honey, without any addition. Just the pure essence of scorched rice meeting hot water, releasing everything it has to give. And in those moments, breaking burnt rice with paint-stained fingers, sipping scorched rice tea on the floor of his studio at 2 a.m, Hwang Hyunjin is perhaps the most authentically himself that he ever gets to be. Not the visual, not the center, not the idol that the internet dissects and debates and obsesses over. Just an artist, feeding himself in the oldest, simplest, most human way possible, finding nourishment not just in the food but in the process of making it. In the waiting, in the listening, in the acceptance that the most beautiful things in cooking, in art, in life, are the ones that weren't supposed to happen but did anyway. And here's the final layer that makes this story hit different. Nurungji is disappearing. Alright, take a breath, because number 4 is about to shift the entire mood of this list. We're crossing oceans for this one, literally. The next member's secret food love has roots in a place thousands of miles from Korea, and the reason he's connected to it is a story that's never been told in full. Curious? Say next. Number 4.
Han.
The nomadic boy's hidden Malaysian comfort, the flaky street legend. You know him as the lyrical wizard of Stray Kids, the guy who can spit fire at lightning speed on tracks like District 9 or La 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 and then turn around and hit a soaring vocal run that leaves you absolutely breathless. Han Jae-sung is a force of nature, a musical genius who seems to have an infinite reservoir of creative energy. But behind the bright smiles, the loud laughter, and the chaotic variety show persona, there is a deeply introverted boy who knows exactly what it feels like to be a stranger in a strange land. Before he ever stepped foot into JYP Entertainment, before he became the heart and soul of 3RACHA alongside Chan and Changbin, Jae-sung spent some of the most critical, formative years of his life thousands of miles away from Korea, living in Malaysia. It was a time of immense freedom but also profound isolation, a period where a young boy had to figure out who he was while navigating a culture, a language, and a landscape that were entirely different from anything he had ever known. And in those quiet, humid afternoons in Selangor, when the tropical rain would suddenly drum against the roof and the weight of his own uncertain future felt almost too heavy to carry, Jae-sung found a culinary sanctuary that has stayed with him to this day, a secret comfort food that he almost never talks about but constantly craves in the chilly, high-pressure environment of Seoul, roti canai. Yes, the legendary Malaysian flatbread, flaky, buttery, and cooked to golden perfection on a hot iron griddle. To understand why this dish is so deeply woven into Jae-sung's soul, you have to understand the magic of Malaysian Mamak culture. In Malaysia, Mamak stalls are not just places to eat. They are the literal heartbeat of the community. They are open-air, casual eateries run by the Tamil Muslim community, operating 24 hours a day under the warm night sky, filled with the clatter of metal spatulas, the sweet aroma of condensed milk, and the low hum of television screens showing late-night football matches. For a young Jae-sung, who often felt like an outsider as a Korean teenager attending an international school, the local Mamak was a place where he could simply disappear into the crowd. He would sit at one of those cheap plastic tables, breathing in the thick air scented with cardamom, turmeric, and toasted ghee, and watch the roti masters work their magic. The preparation of roti canai is a performance art in itself. The chef takes a small, oil-slicked ball of dough made from flour, water, eggs, and clarified butter, and begins to stretch it. With a series of rapid, rhythmic flips and spins that look almost like a dance, the chef throws the dough against the oiled counter until it becomes so thin it is practically translucent, a delicate sheet of gluten that catches the light. Then, they fold it gently into a square envelope, trapping pockets of air inside, and place it onto a massive, sizzling flat-top grill. As it cooks, the ghee melts, creating a spectacular crust that is crispy and golden brown on the outside, while the interior steams into dozens of paper-thin, soft, chewy layers. But the crucial final step, the one that defines a true roti canai, happens the moment it comes off the grill. The chef places the hot bread on a board and, using both hands, quickly claps the sides together in a sharp, crushing motion. This shatters the crispy outer crust and fluffs up the internal layers, turning what was a flat sheet into a light, airy, cloud-like pastry that is ready to absorb whatever sauce it touches. Traditionally, it is served with dal, a mild, earthy lentil curry, or sambal, a fiery chili paste, but Jae-sung's favorite way to eat it, the secret combination that brings him instant comfort, is dipping the hot, savory bread into a small dish of white sugar, sometimes paired with a glass of ice-cold Milo. The contrast of the salty, buttery, crispy bread with the sweet grit of the sugar is a flavor explosion that instantly transports him back to his youth. For Jae-sung, this isn't just breakfast or a late-night snack. It is the taste of a time before the cameras, before the intense evaluations, and before the heavy expectations of global stardom. In the year since his debut, as Stray Kids soared to the absolute top of the global music industry, Jae-sung has had to face intense pressure, public scrutiny, and his own struggles with social anxiety. When the world gets too loud and his mind starts to race with the relentless pace of idle life, he secretly seeks out this taste of his childhood. While Seoul is filled with trendy restaurants, finding authentic Malaysian roti canai in the city is a challenge. Jisung has been known to quietly search for hidden Southeast Asian restaurants in districts like Itaewon, slipping away during rare breaks to find that one specific flavor that can ground him. When he tears off a piece of that warm, flaky bread with his hands and dips it in sugar, the cold Seoul winters seem to melt away, replaced by the memories of warm tropical breezes, the sound of crickets in the Selangor night, and the simple peace of being a kid with nothing but a notebook and a dream. It is a quiet, sacred ritual of self-soothing, a way for him to reconnect with the boy he was before he became the superstar he is today. And that is why roti canai remains his ultimate hidden love, a dish that stays rarely hear about, but one that holds the key to Han Jisung's heart. You think Han's connection to Malaysia was emotional? Wait until we get to number 3. We're talking about a member who is famous for his love of a very specific food, but his actual, top-secret favorite is something so traditional and visually shocking it will blow your mind. Ready? Say next. Number 3.
Lino.
The chicken boy's fermented forbidden fruit, the ultimate test of odor. Every single stay on this planet knows that Lee Miho is the undisputed king of chicken, a man who has practically built a secondary personality around his devotion to fried poultry, lecturing anyone who will listen about the golden ratio of batter, the importance of oil temperature, and why chicken is not just food but a fundamental way of life. It is his public brand, his safety blanket, the running joke that has kept fans entertained for years as he jokingly threatens to pack members into air fryers. But behind that lighthearted, poultry-obsessed exterior lies a culinary mind that is infinitely more complex, daring, and frankly, terrifying to the average diner. Lee No is not just a guy who likes to eat. He is a highly skilled home cook who dry ages expensive cuts of beef in his own dedicated meat fridge, handles kitchen knives with the terrifying precision of a trained assassin, and possesses a palate that craves the absolute extremes of traditional Korean gastronomy. And his ultimate, top-secret, hidden food obsession, the one that he keeps far away from the cameras, the one that makes the other members run screaming from the dorms, the one that represents the absolute final boss of Korean traditional cuisine, is Hanjeo-ho, fermented skate. Let that sink in. We're talking about a dish that is widely considered by international food critics, travel hosts, and brave foodies alike to be one of the most challenging, pungent, and visually intimidating edible substances on the face of the earth, often ranked alongside Sweden's infamous surströmming or Iceland's akkarl. Hanjeo-ho is not just fermented. It is a chemical event. Skate is a unique cartilaginous fish that does not possess a traditional bladder or kidneys. Instead, it excretes its nitrogenous waste, specifically urea, directly through its skin. When the fish is harvested and left to ferment in a cold cellar for weeks, or even months, that urea naturally breaks down into pure ammonia. The fish does not rot or spoil because the high concentration of ammonia acts as a natural preservative, preventing harmful bacteria from growing while completely restructuring the chemical makeup of the flesh. The result is a platter of raw, pinkish-purple fish slices that emit a vapor so powerful, so piercing, and so chemical in nature that it smells exactly like a mixture of industrial hair dye, household glass cleaner, and a public restroom that has been baking under a summer sun. The vapor is so intense that when you first put a piece in your mouth, the ammonia gas actually rises through the back of your throat and shoots straight up into your nasal passages, clear-cutting your sinuses like a blast of liquid wasabi on steroids and leaving a persistent, tingling, chemical burn on the roof of your mouth. The texture is equally polarizing, consisting of a tough, rubbery flesh surrounding thick, crunchy strips of central cartilage that you have to chew relentlessly to release the flavor. And Lee No absolutely adores it. He doesn't just tolerate it, he actively seeks it out, appreciating the scientific beauty of the fermentation process and the sheer complexity of a flavor that most modern people find completely repulsive. To eat it like a true connoisseur, he prepares Hanjeo Samhap, the holy trinity of Korean fermentation, which pairs a slice of the pungent, ammonia-soaked skate with a slice of rich, fatty, slow-boiled pork belly, boss Sam, and a piece of heavily aged, deeply sour, unwashed kimchi, mukunji. The magic of samhap is a masterclass in food chemistry. The thick layer of pork fat coats the tongue, creating a barrier that softens the initial blow of the ammonia, while the sharp acidity of the old kimchi cuts through the fishiness, resulting in a combination that is sweet, savory, sour, creamy, and chemical all at once. It is a dish that was historically born in the southwestern port city of Mokpo, where fishermen carrying fresh skate up the Yongsan River discovered that while all other fish would spoil during the long journey, the skate would simply ferment and become incredibly flavorful. For Lee No, eating hanjio is a deeply reflective, almost meditative experience that mirrors his own approach to life. He is a man who doesn't care about trends, who operates entirely on his own wavelength, and who finds genuine satisfaction in the things that require patience, strength, and an open mind. While the rest of the world runs away from the smell, he steps closer, recognizing that behind the initial, intimidating barrier of the ammonia lies a rich, historic, and deeply satisfying depth that only the brave can ever truly appreciate. It is the ultimate reflection of his tsundere personality, sharp, biting, and intensely intimidating at first contact, but incredibly warm, complex, and rewarding once you get past the surface. But wait, we're down to the top 2. And number 2 is going to turn the image of Stray Kids' most angelic, sweet-faced member completely upside down. You know him for his delicate beauty and his sweet baking, but his secret late-night craving is a dish that looks straight out of a horror movie. Intrigued? Say next to find out. Number 2. Felix. The sweet angel's demonic midnight feast, tearing apart claws in the dark. When you look at Lee Felix, your brain automatically registers words like angelic, ethereal, and wholesome. He is the boy with freckles scattered across his cheeks like stardust, the gentle soul who spends his rare days off baking trays of chocolate brownies and cookies to hand-deliver to overworked staff members, other idols, and anyone who looks like they're having a rough day. He radiates this soft, warm, almost fairy-like energy, speaking in a quiet whisper that contrasts hilariously with his cavernous, subterranean, deep voice. If you had to picture Felix eating, you'd probably imagine him neatly slicing a piece of strawberry shortcake in a brightly lit cafe, or maybe enjoying a bowl of mild, creamy pasta. But this is the ultimate deception, a visual trick that hides one of the most hardcore, visceral, and visually shocking food obsessions in the entire group. Because when the sun goes down, the cameras turn off, and the crushing weight of global stardom gets too heavy, Felix's ultimate comfort food, his top secret late-night craving, is dakbal, spicy chicken feet. And not just the convenient, boneless kind that you can easily eat with a fork. No, Felix is a purist. He craves the bone-in, fiery red, gelatinous claws that look like they were pulled straight out of a low-budget horror movie prop department. If you have never seen authentic Korean dakbal, it is a sight that requires a strong stomach. They are literally chicken feet, skin, tendons, and cartilage, with every tiny toe and joint fully intact, glistening under a thick, sticky, blood-red glaze of concentrated gochugaru and capsaicin extract. There is no actual meat on a chicken foot. The entire eating experience is a tactile, messy, and intensely primal battle between your teeth and the collagen-rich structure of the foot. You have to wear plastic gloves, grab the claw by the ankle, put the entire foot into your mouth, and use your tongue and teeth to systematically strip the spicy skin and chewy tendons away from the tiny, delicate bones, spitting them out one by one like watermelon seeds. It is a process that is completely devoid of grace, elegance, or aesthetic value. And yet, this sweet Aussie boy, who grew up in the sunny suburbs of Sydney eating meat pies and avocado toast, has become an absolute master of the dakbal ritual. To understand how this happened, you have to look back at his early trainee days, a period of intense emotional turbulence, language barriers, and crushing loneliness. When Felix first arrived in Korea, he could barely speak the language. He was freezing in the harsh Seoul winters, and he was constantly terrified of being eliminated from the debut lineup. In Korean culture, spicy food is not just a flavor profile, it is a form of emotional therapy. The intense, Burning pain of capsaicin triggers the brain to release a flood of endorphins and dopamine, creating a natural high that temporarily numbs stress, anxiety, and physical exhaustion. During those dark, uncertain nights, Felix discovered that the fiery, burning heat of dak ball was the only thing that could match the intensity of the stress inside his chest. It became his secret weapon against homesickness. Now, even as a global superstar, he still relies on this demonic midnight feast. He will order a steaming tray of the spiciest dak ball available, sit on the floor of his room in the dark, and tear into the spicy claws, letting the sweat run down his face and the fire burn his tongue until his mind finally goes quiet. It is the ultimate contrast, the visual angel of stray kids, the boy who bakes sweet treats for the world, finding his deepest peace while tearing apart spicy chicken claws in the dark. It is real, it is raw, and it is a side of Felix that stays have never been allowed to see. And now, we have arrived at the absolute summit. Number 1. The leader, the father figure, the man who carries the weight of stray kids on his shoulders. His secret food is so simple, yet it holds a story of sacrifice, loneliness, and a late-night promise that made stray kids what they are today. Ready for the final, most emotional reveal? Say next. Number 1. Bang Chan, the leader's midnight lifeline, a salty tear-stained slice of home. You know him as the ultimate protector, the father figure, the man who carries the entire weight of stray kids' past, present, and future on his broad shoulders. Bang Chan is the leader who stayed up for nights on end to produce their entire discography, the one who meticulously handpicked every single member of the group, and the one who has publicly promised, time and time again, to protect them and stays until the very end. He is the anchor of the group, a human shield who always puts himself last, skipping meals, living on iced Americanos, and relying on cheap convenience store ramen or delivery food just to keep his body moving while he spends 20 hours a day locked inside the 3 Racha recording studio. But behind this legendary work ethic, behind the polished leader who speaks 3 languages fluently and commands the stage with absolute authority, lies a boy who spent 7 long, agonizing years as a JYP trainee. 7 years of watching his closest friends debut in other groups while he remained in the dark basement studios, wondering if his dream would ever come true, if he had made a colossal mistake by leaving his family, his home, and the warm Sydney sun behind at the tender age of 13. And during those years of intense isolation, when the pressure was suffocating and he was at his absolute breaking point, Chan survived on a secret, deeply personal comfort food that he still keeps hidden in his studio desk to this day: Vegemite on toast. To anyone who didn't grow up in Australia, Vegemite is a culinary mystery, a thick, dark brown food paste made from leftover brewer's yeast extract, vegetable additives, and spice extracts. It is notoriously salty, intensely bitter, and has a strong, pungent aroma that foreigners often compare to industrial axle grease or liquid bouillon cubes. But to an Australian, Vegemite is not just food. It is identity, comfort, and the literal taste of home. There is a precise, almost scientific ritual to preparing it. You toast a slice of cheap white bread until it is golden and piping hot. Quickly spread a generous, thick layer of salted butter so it melts and pools in the warm crevices of the toast, and then scrape an incredibly thin, paper-thin, almost microscopic smear of Vegemite across the top. If you put too much, the bitterness is overwhelming. If you put just the right amount, the interaction between the melting, creamy butter and the salty, umami yeast paste creates a savory masterpiece that coats your mouth in warmth. For a teenager training alone in a foreign land, a simple jar of Vegemite was a direct connection to his mother's kitchen in Sydney. Every time a care package arrived from Australia, Chan would pull out the glass jar, toast a piece of bread in the communal kitchen late at night, and eat it in the dark. The saltiness of the yeast paste would mix with the actual tears of a lonely boy who missed his family, creating a flavor profile that was deeply emotional, nostalgic, and painful all at once. It was his lifeline, the food that reminded him of who he was and the promise he had made to his parents, that he would not return to Sydney until he had made them proud. Today, even as a global superstar who sells out stadiums across the world, Chan still keeps a jar of Vegemite in the 3 Ratcha studio. When the mixing boards get too loud, the track revisions seem endless, and the weight of leading his 7 brothers through the chaotic storm of the music industry feels too heavy to bear. He toasted a piece of bread, spread that familiar black paste, and took a bite. It is a grounding ritual, a quiet moment of reflection that brings the leader of Stray Kids back to the 13-year-old boy from Sydney who refused to give up. See you, Army.